And now let me welcome on to the show, Colorado State head coach Niko Medved. Nico, thanks for being here, man. What's going on?
Rob, appreciate you having me. Good to be here. It's that time of year, man. Hoops is starting, and in our business, it'll be April before we can blink an eye.
I could not be more ready for college basketball games with fans in the stands. It's going to be awesome this year. But first and foremost, I need to hit you with the hard-hitting questions right up front, right off the bat. Tim Miles is now back in the Mountain West, even though at this point he's a better podcast host. I do want to know, are you prepared for what you're going to do in the post-game handshake lines? Are we going to get like the direct blow-by? What do I have to do to convince you to not even give him eye contact in the post-game handshakes?
That's going to be interesting to see how that goes. It'll be my first time competing against Timmy, head coach to head coach, and so I'm looking forward to it. Tim's going to do what he does. And for the most part, I thought the Mountain West got better in the off season, but there are a couple of iffy decisions there. So it's awesome though, Rob. I mean, to have him back in the league and a lot of the other coaches like that, I think it's great for the league. It's great for the brand of the league. And I can't wait to compete with him. But San Jose State just got better. I know that.
So I do want to ask you about the conference as a whole. We were talking about this a little bit off air. The last time that you were here, when you were an assistant under Timmy, it was probably the best years that we've seen out of the Mountain West. I mean, Kawhi was here. Jimmer Fredette was here. 4 and 5 teams were getting to the tournament. Alfred had New Mexico rolling. UNLV was doing their thing. Dave Rice era. The league isn't quite at that level now, but it feels like it's kind of trending back that way. Like you guys are good enough to be in the conversation about the NCAA tournament this year. Nevada's probably good enough to be in the conversation about the NCAA tournament. San Diego State is always going to be really good at this point. It just kind of feels like that's what they are. So in your mind, what do you think the Mountain West needs to do to get back to being a conference that sends like half of its roster to the NCAA tournament?
I think, we're on a really good trend, Rob. I mean, I think you look at it last year, up until the last week of the season, we had 4 teams in the conversation. We were one of the first left out. We did get 2 in. So I think we were right there. I think that's part of it. Obviously, as everybody knows, it's how you schedule in the non-league. You got to have success in the non-league. I think as I look around, and ourselves included, our non-league schedules are tough. I mean, there's ones that are going to allow you with success to have an opportunity to be in that conversation. So when we get into league play, much like last year, we've got several quad one and quad 2 opportunities in our league. And then I think the other phenomenon you're seeing is the league from top to bottom continues to get better. I mean, you look at these programs like New Mexico and UNLV, they're tremendous programs, tremendous history and success. They're going to continue to get better and better. Both Kevin and Richard will do a great job. Wyoming, just up the road from us, Jeff Linder does a terrific job. You watch, they're trending in a great direction. Fresno has their whole roster back. They finished the season really strong. Justin does a great job. Even Timmy does a decent job. I'm joking, but he's going to help. I mean, I could go on. And so I think we're on a great trend. And I think we just keep doing what we're doing. And Rob, I'm hopeful that we're going to see this league continue to be a multiple bid league moving on.
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest thing for leagues like the Mountain West is to make sure that the bottom teams in the league all have really strong computer numbers. As long as you don't have complete landmines on your schedule, multiple complete landmines, that's just going to raise the computer numbers for everything. And as we've seen, like it's your net rating and your KenPom rating, and people pay so much attention to that stuff. So having a guy like Tim Miles, as loath as I am to say nice things about him, having him at San Jose State is something that is going to make that team better. And it's not going to be that landmine. Wyoming has to get better. There's no way New Mexico can struggle the way they've struggled in recent years. That's too good of a program. So I agree with you. I think that all of this stuff is cyclical. I think we're going to see the Mountain West getting better. And part of the reason it keeps getting better, Colorado State, going to be really good this year. I want to talk about your guys. I want to start with David Roddy. And for people that have not seen him play, I mean, this dude is he's part Draymond Green, part Mark Vital, part future NFL tight end. You list him at 6'5". I don't know if I believe that. You've also, I believe, listed him as a guard. I don't know if I believe that either. And he checks in at like a cool 250 pounds. And by the way, he averaged 15, 10, and 2.5 assists. Like this dude is something else. He's an anchor for a lot of your like really fun small ball lineups. Talk to me about this kid and what makes him special as a player.
It's funny, I listened to you talk about him, and essentially it's kind of like what you're saying is you just don't even really know how to describe him, right? He's
Yeah.
such an anomaly. He's an enigma. I've never coached anybody like him. He's the most versatile player I've ever coached. You don't really have a comparable, that way. And he legitimately plays all 5 positions. Again, we'll play him in our P spot when we go small. We'll have him initiate action. He scores all over the court. He's a versatile defender. He's a terrific rebounder. In my estimation, he's the most difficult matchup in our league. And so, he makes coaches like me look a lot better than we are, right? When you have guys like him, and it makes it really, really fun. And so on top of that, he's just a terrific kid. He's so talented. He's a terrific young man, is continuing to grow as a leader, and he's had a great offseason. And yeah, I think he's poised to be a guy that can contend for Player of the Year in the Mountain West. And so if fans haven't had an opportunity to see him play, you're going to love watching him, because he's just so different than anybody you've seen. And again, we move him all over the court, and he's a terrific player.
Yeah, so this is probably like a bigger picture coaching question, but when you have a guy like that, how valuable is that as a coach? I mean, when you look at what modern basketball is, you want switchable players all over the floor, right? You want big men that can guard on the perimeter and also protect the rim, and you want guys that are able to play make at 1 through 5. And like David Roddy is the guy that makes all of that stuff work for you guys. So how much fun is it to design? Like you can do whatever you want. Like you can get so creative as a basketball coach. How much fun is that?
It's awesome. And, I love what we do offensively, and we've been, pretty good on that end and pretty creative. But again, it's having players like David that you can have all the ideas you want in the world, but, you have to have people who can successfully execute those things. And so when you're trying to go and move chess pieces around, or what coaches come up with, you think they're brilliant ideas, but they only work when you have players like him. And so it is a lot of fun. It gives us a lot of versatility. Again, gives us the opportunity to mix and match and do different things. And I think as we've, kept this team together, that's the other thing, is we have continuity, Rob. So guys who have been in a system now for several years, they're more and more comfortable. And I think that allows you as a coach to even tweak and tinker a little bit more, because guys really have a good understanding of what we're trying to do.
So I do want to ask you about that, because I think where the real growth you guys have made is on the defensive end of the floor. I'm a big KenPom guy. I know that you're a KenPom guy. So you went from 261st in defensive efficiency your first year to 172nd last season to 72nd last year. I'm assuming with everybody back, you're going to take another step forward this year. How much of that has been kind of the continuity of your roster? How much of that has been people just kind of understanding what you want? Is that you've been targeting better defenders and recruiting? Like why is that? Why are we seeing that trend with Colorado?
I think it's really all those things. I think we made a change in systems a few years back. I think that maybe created, not just from the players, from the coaches, but really kind of figuring out kind of what you wanted to be, what your identity was defensively. I think having that continuity really, really helped. And then I think just the understanding of some veteran guys and knowing what had to be done. And, you point to KenPom, I think last year, before we went on that 3-week pause at the end of the season where we just kept missing games because opponents had COVID issues, I think we climbed all the way up to 38th defensively. And then we really didn't play good enough defense down the stretch. I mean, if we really look at it, and we didn't shoot the ball as well either, but we had a real dip in our defensive efficiency, I thought, the last part of the season. And quite frankly, probably cost us the NCAA tournament, right? We were one win away, from getting there. And so we have made huge strides, but we're going to have to continue to make strides. I think we finished the year first offensively in our league and fourth defensively. And I think in any league in the country, you look at it, if you're able to be in the top 2 or 3 in both offense and defensive efficiency, you're probably going to look at the standings and you're going to have a chance to win your league. And I think that's everywhere. And so I think we know that that's a tremendous challenge, but we've just got to continue to move the needle.
So you mentioned you guys were 1 win away, and you had that 3-week pause. It's such a weird season, the way everything happened last year with all of the pauses and all of the shutdowns. And I mean, you guys were playing back-to-back roadies, right? Like going on the road and playing the same team twice in the same site. So how is this offseason? How has that inspired you guys, right? Like I'm sure this is a lot of coach speak and a lot of kind of cliches or whatever, but it feels like that's the kind of thing that can really motivate a team when you went through all of that and you come one win away from what is pretty much the ultimate goal, right?
I hope so. I hope it's that balance between there's some confidence in what we're doing and who we are, that we really believe we can be successful and we can be a good team. But it's also the understanding it's hard to be in those rooms, right? When you're going in selection Sunday and you see your team, one of the first couple left out, and that pain of regret, man, one more win if we did and so you hope that there's that balance between confidence and also that hunger of, man, we got to take the next step. We don't want to go through that again. We want to be in the NCAA tournament. And heck, we were a win or two away from having a chance to win the first regular season championship, ever here since Colorado State's been in the Mountain West. And so we were close, but we didn't get it done. So I think this team has confidence, but we also know to take those next steps to go from good to great is really, really difficult. And I think that has been a motivator for us.
All right. I want to talk about your backcourt a little bit too, because these guys deserve a shout out. Isaiah Stevens and Kendall Moore. I think you guys have them listed at 6 foot and 5'10". I don't know if I necessarily believe those listings, but those guys are just so much fun. Talk to me about them. And I guess kind of Isaiah specifically, because he's a guy that I think belongs with David Roddy in the conversation for, at minimum, first team All Mountain West. And if things go the right way for him, maybe even the Mountain West Player of the Year.
Yeah. Kendall, I would tell you, Kendall Moore, you know me, Rob, there's not many guys I can post up. Kendall Moore is one of the only guys that's a really good college player that I might be able to take in the post. Man, I love you. But he's been a day one guy for us. He's been, one of the first guys we signed. He's 5'10", 145 pounds on a good day. He may not be that tall, but he is the toughest, most competitive dude I've ever been around. He is an everyday guy. And it's funny, as we got new coaches in here, it only takes them a couple of weeks to be like, man, I love this kid, and knows what we want, is a competitor. And he really is a huge key to what we're doing. Isaiah Stevens is tremendous. I can't imagine there's a better guard around. And he just plays the game at such a high level. And, David and Isaiah, all these guys are so close. They're best buddies, right? But I know Isaiah Stevens views himself as an elite player. And I think he's poised to have a tremendous year. He's our hardest worker, unbelievably coachable, takes the leadership responsibility on his shoulders. And again, he's another guy, if you haven't seen play, he's as good of a guard as there is. And so I'm really excited for him. And I think he's poised to have a huge season.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good guards in your league. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Isaiah Stevens and Grant Sherfield square off when you guys take on Nevada. That is going to be a lot of fun for college basketball fans. All right, a couple more questions for you. Adam Thistlewood, great name. He's back. John Tonji is back. You got Chandler Jacobs, Division II All-American, originally was committed to Texas Tech, I believe. He's joining you guys this year. So you're you're loaded on the perimeter. How often are we going to see these 4 and 5 guard looks where nobody on the floor is taller than 6'5"? A lot, I'm hoping.
What's interesting is that analytically was such a good lineup for us really on both ends of the floor. And I think we'll do that. I think, so much of it depends on matchups and situations. I think we've got some young, big guys. We played a freshman and a sophomore there last year who continue to get better. Our improvement comes from within. And so I think those guys will improve. But yeah, we've got a lot of versatility on the perimeter, a lot of quickness, speed, shooting, different things we can do. And we're not afraid to play small. And I think it's kind of fun to play that way. We play fast and we play aggressive. And, but as a coach, I think we have a lot of versatility as a team. And I think that that's something that we buy into. And so, I hope all those guys out there that are out on the East Coast that can stay up late like you, Rob, and get a chance to watch the Mountain West, because it's going to be a lot of fun this year.
Yeah, you mentioned your small ball lineups. This is courtesy of my friends over at the 3-Man Weave, but your lineups when you had David Roddy at the 5 were 16 points per 100 possessions, better than lineups when David Roddy wasn't at the 5. And I don't know if that's matchups. I don't know if that's a product of young bigs. I don't know if that's a product of the difficulty in dealing with him at the 5 spot, but you're right. Analytically, those lineups were a lot of fun to watch. So talk to me about some of the big guys, Deshawn Thomas, James Moores. They're veterans now in your program. They're back. They're guys that I do think probably need to take a step forward, and there's some room for them to grow.
I do. I thought, James Moores was a freshman for us from New Zealand. He moved into the starting lineup about midway through the years before. I thought he improved maybe more than anybody in our program. I thought he really improved in his first year of college basketball over here. Deshawn Thomas is another kid that really improved. He's a big that can really stretch the floor and shoot it for us. So he kind of gives us something a little bit different. Again, I think both of those guys have had a great offseason. And, Deshawn, I think sometimes players can make their biggest jump from their sophomore to junior year. Once they kind of really learn, the game slows down, they know who they are, they become stronger, more comfortable. They played a lot of minutes. And so I think Deshawn for us is a guy too, who's had a great offseason. And so, we added some guys that I'm excited about, but a lot of our improvement really comes from within. These guys that have been here, they've been with the program, they work really, really hard. And I'm excited. We have a lot of continuity. So they're a fun group to be around.
All right. So let me ask you this. This is the last question I got for you. What has to happen this season for Colorado State to win the Mountain West?
Unlike every team, you got to stay healthy, right? I mean, so you don't control that, but you got to stay healthy. I think it's for us to continue to improve defensively, to take that next step, and even that we did, but to be a team that, I think all of our losses last year, we gave up more than a point of possession, and we've just got to be better in those situations where we can be more consistent on the defensive end. And I think those are the two biggest keys for us. And not get too up, not get too down, keep doing what we're doing. But I think for us, it's staying healthy and it's continuing to improve on the defensive end. And I think the last thing really, Rob, too, I think if I had one problem with us offensively last year, too many turnovers. And I think that's something we like to play aggressive. But I think we've got to cut down the turnovers. So if we do a better job of taking care of the ball, take the next jump defensively and stay healthy, I think this team has a chance to be right there.
That's the most coach speak thing I've ever heard out of you.
Isn't that awesome? Like I thought about that and I just came up with about 4 cliches right there. And At the end of the day, we got to score more points than the other team, right?
We just got to get better day by day in practice. If we get 1% better every day in practice, we're going to win the conference kind of.
What's so awesome about basketball and it's college, like the margins are so small, right? I mean, on a given night, anyone can beat anyone. You go through these leagues and you have your ups and downs and all those things. And it's going to be a dogfight. Ultimately, you got to protect home court. You're going to have to find a way to go on the road and get a big win. And, ultimately when a game doesn't go your way, can you bounce back and get it done the next day? And that's a cliche too, but man, the college basketball is fun. It's going to be so awesome with the fans in there. The Mountain West has great fans and great places to play. And I can't wait to walk back out there and kind of feel what that's all about again.
Yeah, I don't think I've been this excited. I don't know if it's the lack of having normal college basketball season. I don't know if it's the fact that I haven't been to a game in 22 months, whatever it is. I don't know if I've ever been this excited for college basketball, and doing all of these interviews and all of these shows with all these coaches has only ramped up that excitement just a little bit. Nico, listen, man, I really do appreciate the time. I'm going to let you get out of here and keep preparing. I know your goal is to make the NCAA tournament this season. I personally will think it's a successful Colorado State basketball season as long as you sweep Tim Miles. That's all I need.
You know what's crazy about that? We only play him once this year. We got to go to San Jose, and he doesn't even get to go back to Fort Collins. So, so we got our work cut out for us. But if we go 1-0 against San Jose, that'll be a good year for us.
I'm going to have a conversation with the Mountain West schedule maker. I'm allowing Tim Miles to come make his triumphant return to Fort Collins, Colorado.
Rob, I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Nico. Before we move on, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up for Bet Rivers yet, now is the time, because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, it's more secure, and it's more reliable. Now that basketball season is tipping off, get in on the action at betrivers.com today, or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. You must be 21 years or older. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And while I got you here, let's talk about the Field of 68 Media Network, where college basketball matters most all year round. This is a digital media and podcast network that we've been building over the course of the last year. We have shows hosted by some of your favorite players covering the program that they love the most. AJ Guyton hosts the House of Hoosier. Eric Devendorf covers Syracuse on the scorers table. Dan Dickow hosts the Gonzaga Bulldog broadcast. We have Florida's Patrick Young and Duke's Andre Dawkins and North Carolina's Shammond Williams and Michigan's Stu Douglas and Illinois' Deshawn Thomas. The list goes on and on and on. We have more than 30 shows right now. So hit the links below and check them all out. And while you're at it, make sure that you go check out the Field of 12 Media Network, your home for college football. All right. In 3, 2, 1. That was Colorado State head coach Niko Medved. Niko Medved. There you go. All right. Let me try this over. Let me start this over. 3, 2, 1. Now that was Colorado State head coach Niko Medved. And now I am joined by Eli Betker from Heat Check CBB and Justin Michael from DNVR Sports to help me break down the Colorado State Rams. What's going on, gentlemen? How we doing?
Doing well, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
Doing good. Excited to talk college basketball season. Best time of year.
Yeah, we're back, man. We're back. It's media days. The season's right around the corner. It was 5 weeks from Tuesday is the start of college basketball season. I can't believe that it's already here. It's an exciting time to be a college basketball fan in the Mountain West and specifically in Fort Collins. Justin, let me start you off with this. You've been covering this team for a long time. You've seen a lot of good coaches come through this program years over year. What is it about Nico that kind of makes him so special? And where do you think he kind of ranks? I'm going to go ahead and just say that he's above Tim Miles because I rank Tim Miles at the bottom of every single coaching poll. But where do you kind of think that he ranks in terms of those Colorado State coaches?
I think in terms of where the fans view him, he's probably towards the top. I mean, if you look at success, Tim Miles, Larry Eustace, they both have NCAA tournament appearances to their names. So I guess from a success standpoint, you got to kind of top that before you can say he's like the most successful CSU coach of all time. But I mean, what he's building is very evident, and he kind of came in and it was a difficult situation culture-wise post Eustace. They had a lot of roster turnover, brought in some good assistants with him, and he's really just changed the talent level of this program over the last half decade. I mean, they went from some competitive years under Larry Eustace to legitimately having one of the best rosters in the conference. And he's just so popular. You know, he's a good guy to talk to. I think the players trust him. The community trusts him. And he's just got a good thing going. I'm really excited to see kind of where they're able to take it these next couple of years because they've laid the foundation. Now he has a chance to really kind of cement himself as the guy and kind of earn that role as probably the best coach in CSU basketball history.
He's very difficult not to get along with, right? Like he's such
that's a great point.
Back. And I think it kind of fits the vibe of a Colorado program pretty easily, but two, it's very easy to connect with that. So Eli, let me ask you this. You see the talent level increasing in Colorado State over the years. Where do you think they rank right now in terms of talent in that conference? Because at least in my mind, the Mountain West feels like it's coming back to one of those years where we could get 3, 4, maybe even 5 bids. Maybe not this season, but soon to come with some of the coaching talent back in that league.
Yeah, well, I guess going back to what Justin had said a little bit about just Medved's pedigree and just the person he is, he was tied to a lot of those high major jobs that came up this offseason. And my initial thought was, you know, if he were to go to Minnesota, if he were to go to Utah, some of these vacancies, a lot of these guys can play high major ball and be starters there. David Roddy would be a starter on just about every high major program. Isaiah Stevens could run point for a number of high major programs. So that talent level is really high, even though most of these guys are 3-star recruits and some of them are coming from places where you don't necessarily get a ton of recruiting action. I know, you know, Medved has ties to Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, where a lot of these recruits are from, has some Texas guys on the roster who were a bit unheralded. So it's not necessarily the recruiting pedigree, but it's guys who know how to play basketball at a really high level and can produce at a really high level. So it's different in the sense of what Nevada has in Grant Sherfield and Desmond Cambridge. It's different from what San Diego State has in Matt Bradley and not KJ Fagan, but Trey Pulliam and those guys there. But it's still guys who are high major S players who are playing on a Mountain West team. So the talent level is very high, and it's right on par with the program like San Diego State for the top spot in the Mountain West, I'd say.
So I want to hear from both of you guys on this. I think David Roddy is probably one of my 5 favorite players in college basketball. It's not that often that you find a 6'4" kind of like point center. He's like part Draymond Green and part Bam Adebayo, and I think probably part Charles Barkley for someone that's his size. He's fun to watch, and he allows you to kind of create some of these really unique lineups where you can go super small and really space the floor. And it seems like Niko has a lot of fun and can get really creative with some of the stuff that he can run. So, I mean, Justin, you might as well start. What's it like watching this guy play every single night? That's got to be a fun thing to do for you.
He's such a good dude. I mean, we actually, DNVR, we do some shirts and stuff. We have a NLI deal now with David Roddy, so we're gonna have a David Roddy shirt coming out, which I'm really pumped about. But he's just one of the more unique players in college basketball. Like, he can guard a point guard, and there were times last year where he was tasked with trying to stop Neemias Queta at Utah State. Like, there aren't a lot of players like him. He's nothing but muscle. He moves deceptively well with the basketball. I think that's one of the things that gets underrated is his footwork and handles. He's able to kind of create space. He is undersized, but he knows how to get to the hoop. He knows what he has to do to score. And he's just so unselfish. I mean, I think that's the thing that really separates Stevens and Roddy from maybe some other superstars is they're really they're really team oriented. And they're just like one of those guys where if you're doubling him, he's going to dish the ball out to the perimeter. You know, if you're going to give him space, he's going to score. And they're just relentless. Like, I've watched a lot of teams over the years, and this team, they never stop fighting. I mean, I think it showed 2 years ago, they had a triple overtime win in Tulsa where they just had big swings. They had a really gutty win at Viejas last year where John Tonje hit the game-winning shot. And anyways, getting back on track with Roddy. He's just a really unselfish, really unique player. And I think he's really going to take the nation by storm this year with CSU having some high-profile games. I'm excited to see kind of like where his profile ends up going now that there is attention on CSU outside of just, you know, people like me and Eli.
Yeah, Eli, what do you think of him?
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me in doing some research about CSU this upcoming season, and now that we have another season of data on David Roddy, is it sounds like kind of a weird comparison, but there are a lot of statistical similarities between David Roddy and Trevian Williams from Purdue. And I think one of the main similarities there is that you can give the ball to Roddy on the elbow or in the high post, and he's able to drive it to the basket with, you know, elusive quickness, or he can dump it off to one of most likely 3 or 4 perimeter shooters on the CSU team. So if you're an opponent of CSU, it's really a difficult situation if the Rams give the ball to Roddy in that situation, because he's somewhere around a 67% finisher at the rim, which is elite. And at the same time, when you surround him with guys like Isaiah Stevens, Adam Thistlewood, Kendall Moore, and now Chandler Jacobs, who's an elite 3-point shooter, then it's almost a matter of just trying to deny Roddy the basketball at all, because once he gets it, he's going to do something well with it. And I did see that I think it's Trevian Williams, Baylor Shireman of South Dakota State, and David Roddy, who are the only players last year who had, I believe, an assist rate above 18 and defensive rebounding percentage above 25. So, like, he's doing a lot of good things. He's taking care of the basketball, and it's just, you know, if CSU were like a Mario team, he'd be Wario on this team. He's just a bowling ball and just knocks people over. So he's just a pleasure to watch. He's a really fun player.
Well,
I'm glad you mentioned the passing, though. Just sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Go ahead.
He's a really gifted passer. Like, touch passes, he can do the full court Nikola Jokic thing where he's hitting guards in stride. They have guards that like to get to the rim and cut to the hoop, and he's really good about, you know, making the bounce pass and setting on the other side of the big guy. He's just deceptive touch. They'll mention it 800 times this year on TV, but he used to be a high school quarterback. And I really do think that kind of plays into his ability to kind of just make some of those weird angle passes.
Yeah, I remember watching him play in high school. I think he was a year younger and was playing on Trey Jones at UT.
Yeah.
Just this kid. And it's like, he was like 6'3" at the time, but he's out here like throwing down like massive dunks on people. He doesn't look like he should be as athletic as he is, but he's a crazy athlete. And I think part of it, I do want to talk about Isaiah Stevens in a little bit, but since we're on David Roddy, I think his presence defensively and what he can kind of provide in terms of the switchability and the different looks that you can give is part of the reason why Colorado State has taken that step forward. I mean, the big difference for him has been on the defensive end of the floor, right? Like, I just brought up the KenPom numbers here. In Niko's first year, they ranked 261st in defensive efficiency on KenPom. In his second season, in 2020, it was 172nd. This past year, 72nd. And I expect that number to continue to climb now that you literally have everybody coming back from last season. So it's not just the versatility offensively that he brings. I think it's the presence on the defensive end of the floor, if that makes sense.
And that's big for really the whole roster. I mean, when you look at guys like Adam Thistlewood and Kendall Moore, those are actually two of the better one-on-one defenders on the team, guys that have played a lot of minutes over the last 4 years. You brought up the defensive metrics. One of the notes I had here on my preseason preview type stuff is this team's ceiling is going to be determined by how good they are defensively. They have improved each and every year under Niko Medved. They were a little bit inconsistent last year. Like you would see moments for 5-8 minutes where they would really be locked down defensively, and then they would just kind of have these lapses, particularly in the paint. I think it's going to fall on David. And then I think you got to look at guys like James Moores and Deshawn Thomas and kind of, can they take their game to the next level? Can you be impactful in the paint? Because there were moments, especially that Utah State Mountain West tournament game, where they just got bullied in the paint. And it's a tough draw. I mean, as good as Roddy is, he's still 6'5", and so there's going to be some limitations on what he's able to do against some of these 7-footers. I think if they can be a top 50 team defensively with what they do offensively, with the versatility that they can bring with the small ball lineups, with a variety of different guys that can beat you from three, they're just going to be such a deep and like versatile team. It's really going to be interesting to see like how high their ceiling is.
Yeah, and I think for me, just to tag on to that a little bit, one of the things that was my concern with CSU post Nico Carvacho was who was going to be their guy to kind of lock things down defensively, because I think, Justin, correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think he's the all-time Mountain West leading rebounder and like all-time double-doubles, and just, I mean, he was just a monster. And so I think CSU really needed a player to step up in that regard and be their sort of stopper and making sure that other opponents didn't get second chance opportunities. And you wouldn't naturally think that your 6'5" guy who's doesn't really have a position tied to his name would be that type of stopper and the guy who could get you 9 boards a night. But Roddy just kind of naturally fit that role, and that's just who he's become, and it's worked really well for CSU. But at the same time, when you match him up against a team that has, Neemias Queta, who of course is kind of in a league of his own, obviously there's going to be some matchup issues there. And I think that's kind of what we saw at the end of the season last year.
So we spent all of this time talking about David Roddy, who may very well end up being the Mountain West preseason player of the year. And I think you can make a pretty good argument. Maybe he's not the best player on this Colorado State roster. Isaiah Stevens, that kid is actually pretty good at basketball. So Eli, what do you like about him? And when you put him on a court with someone like a Kendall Moore, with Adam Thistlewood, we talked a little bit about Chandler Jacobs here. All of a sudden you have a lineup that can play really small, but is really dangerous because of the way that they can shoot and the way that they can score.
Yeah, he's perfect for this offense because of the way that, to me, I really like how he changes speeds. And so he can fly up and down the floor as fast as you want anyone to, but he's also methodical and can slow it down and make really good decisions in the half court. So I really like that about his game. And the thing that I've also noticed is he's rounded out his offensive repertoire quite a bit, and he can hit pretty much from all three levels with a pretty good deal of consistency. So I like that facet of his game. And I mean, he was talked up a lot coming into Colorado State, even though he wasn't necessarily that big of a recruit. But I had a lot of people tell me, this guy's going to be the real deal. And I think he's not even slowly, he's blossoming into the player that I think a lot of people thought he was going to be. And with CSU just as a whole, I think individually, of course, there are stars on this team in Roddy and in Stevens, but I think just collectively as a unit, it really allows all of their skill sets to shine. So if you need Stevens to get the big basket, he'll probably get it for you. If you need him to distribute when opposing defenses are locking down the perimeter, he can dump it off to Roddy or whoever he needs to dump it off to. So he's got a really good arsenal, and I think he's still rounding things out defensively. And kind of how Justin mentioned earlier, if this team gets up to, say, a top 50 team nationally in defense, I think Stevens will play a big part in that. So I'm kind of keeping an eye out on what he can do defensively this year.
Yeah, and I think the real value, Justin, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that when you have a guy like Roddy, who's such a great player that kind of brings everything together, a certain point of his game is I don't want this to sound like I'm talking down on him, but he's almost like a very, very, very good role player, but he's not exactly a guy when you're at the end of a clock, or if you really need a bucket, or if things are kind of bogged down defensively, it's kind of hard to say, all right, let's just give David Roddy the ball and go make something happen. Whereas Isaiah Stevens, he can kind of make something out of nothing, if that makes sense. So I think the value of having your two best players be one, a great dynamic player that can make things happen one-on-one, and then the other guy just be a really good kind of piece that brings everything else together. That's if you're going to have 2 star players, I feel like that's the perfect complement of star players to have. Am I making sense when I say that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. They play really well off of each other. And you're 100% right. Like Roddy's not the guy you want having to create his own shot along the perimeter as, time's expiring. And Isaiah kind of is. He's proven to be a much better isolation scorer than I ever thought he would be, especially early in his career. He's just shifty. Like Eli mentioned the fact that he can change speeds. He has some of the best body control I've ever seen, just in terms of like speed, fast. All of a sudden he's in the lane and then he gets past the guy and gets to the hoop. And you're like, I don't know how he did that so smoothly. He's just a lot of fun to watch. He's one of the more intelligent players, I think, in the country, just in terms of he takes whatever the defense is giving you. Like very rarely are you going to be able to disrupt that guy. And he's been so clutch throughout his career. I mean, I think he has 3 game tying or game winning shots off the top of my head. So, I mean, just he's come up for this team time and time again. And I think if Stevens can kind of put himself in the running for Mountain West Conference Player of the Year, I think that's probably best for CSU's success long-term, more so than what you're going to get out of Roddy. Like he's going to get his points. He's going to get his rebounds. I think they need Stevens to be the clear-cut, like best point guard in the league. And that's going to be interesting because there's some talented dudes. I mean, Grant Sherfield's he's a bucket.
Yeah, he's really good. Matt Bradley is really good at San Diego State. There's a lot of good basketball players in this league. There's a lot of good coaches in this league. You got Richard Pitino coming in at New Mexico. I'm blanking. What's Lon Kruger's son's name? Kevin Kruger.
Kevin.
Right?
Kevin Kruger. Yeah.
Kevin Kruger coming in at UNLV, and of course Tim Miles. He's had some success in the Mountain West before, so I do think the league is trending in the right direction. And the best news probably for Colorado State is that David Roddy, Isaiah Stevens, these guys are juniors. Assuming they don't have massive seasons, they're probably coming back for another year after this. So it's still kind of a growing process for them. Eli, let me ask you this. In my mind, I think the top 3 teams in this conference are going to be Nevada, San Diego State, and Colorado State. And I don't know if there's necessarily a right answer for the way to kind of rank those 3 teams. It's some people like vanilla ice cream, some people like strawberry ice cream, right? It's all kind of what your preference is. How do you see the top of this league shaking out? What's your prediction?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm still leaning with SDSU just by a slim margin. I think that's probably somewhat unpopular at this point. I think a lot of people are on the Colorado State bandwagon, and rightfully so. I tend to lean with the teams that have a ton of roster continuity, but I love the addition of Matt Bradley there, and I think a lot of those guys can step it up, as we've talked about on this show previously with SDSU. But I think as far as the Rams are concerned, I think Justin really nailed it with the improvement of Isaiah Stevens to go from a great player to an elite one and really take the reins of this offense and be that creator that he can be. But for me, if I had to choose an X factor on this team, it's probably James Moore's, their center and their big man. I see him as a player who could realistically be an efficient back to the basket big man. And if he could be that for this team, then the ability that Roddy has as a forward could just, it goes from him being kind of the centerpiece of this offense to then sometimes being just a decoy, because if you can go from when opposing defenses lock in on Roddy and also have good perimeter defense, if you can just toss it down to Moores and he can just hit a quick post move and get 2 points, then it's like, all right, we went from a good offense to a really, really good offense. And so I'm looking at Moores to be that guy who could potentially take this team to the next level. I do question depth a little bit. I think Chandler Jacobs is the huge addition as a 6th man, but still beyond Jacobs, I think the depth kind of gets a little bit shaky as far as who you can plug in for 10 to 15 minutes. But as far as that top 3, I don't think you can really go wrong. CSU has some really challenging games on their non-conference schedule, so they'll be tested early. But if they can get some quality wins in November and December, they've got a number of SEC teams on their schedule. So, they can pick off one of those, then they're in really good shape to, have a quality Mountain West season and then have a very good at-large profile, which wasn't necessarily the case last season.
Yeah, they definitely didn't schedule down. It's going to be they're going to swing big and go for it. And I've actually talked to the coaches about that a little bit. They're like, I don't want to miss the tournament because we didn't swing big. But even beyond Mississippi State and Alabama, they got St. Mary's on the schedule. They got a neutral game against Tulsa and out in Texas, which is going to be kind of a weird ordeal. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how they hang out. I think I would probably, and I'm a homer obviously, but I would put CSU 1 just based on the experience they return. I do think James Moores is going to have to grow significantly, and I think Deshawn Thomas and whatever role he ends up serving in that 4-5 kind of hybrid role, he's kind of a power forward, kind of a center just based on default. It's going to be big for them. But I'll admit, Nevada scares me a lot. I just think offensively, they're going to be really electric, and I don't know how you slow down Sherfield, having watched him in person a couple of times now. That dude is just insane. But you can't count out San Diego State. So I think it's kind of like 1A, 1B, 1C, and that's a total cop-out at this point, but they're all really good, and I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of how it shakes out.
I mean, it's my guess is it's probably going to come down to like a handful of possessions in each of these games, right? Like, when Colorado State is on the road, can they pick off a victory at Nevada at some point in a 1-point game? And it honestly is probably going to come down to that. You guys did not mention talking about the schedule. Their first real game of the season is against NCAA tournament darling Oral Roberts, and they also play in, I don't know what tournament it actually is. I can't keep track of any of these things. But assuming that they win games, they're probably going to end up getting Creighton, and they could end up getting Colorado as well. So it's they challenged themselves. They went out there and they got some games that they needed to be able to get to put together the kind of resume. And look, we all know how important the computer numbers are, and those are the kind of games that really help boost your computer numbers. Let me ask you guys this, then we can kind of get out of here. Assuming that we look up in March and Colorado State has won the Mountain West, right? Justin and Eli, I want your one kind of X factor that has to go the right way for Colorado State for them to end up being the Mountain West champions.
I like that. I think they've got to be the best defensive team in the Mountain West, because I don't think there are any questions about what they can score. I mean, especially when you look at the numbers, like they're one of the better 3-point shooting teams. They have guys that can score down low. They're good in the mid-range. That's one of the deceptive parts about Isaiah Stevens' game that doesn't get appreciated. He's nasty with some of those crossover moves and just doing a little teardrop floater. Like, he's really dangerous. But it all just comes down to defense and not having these long lapses, because they would have games where they would just give up, like a 13-0 run to somebody like San Diego State. And if you do that against some of these experienced teams, it can just really put you in the hole. Like, they did have the comeback win at Viejas last year. But if they have to do that consistently with the teams in this conference and the amount of veterans, and I mean, even, teams like Fresno State with Orlando Robinson, there's just so much talent. And so I think it's consistency and then just defensive success, because they're going to be able to put points on the board. They're going to be able to outrun teams, especially at home. That Oral Roberts game you mentioned, that could be a real shootout with Max Absness coming to town. It's really going to be interesting to just see how they handle all of it, and just, the grind, like playing this type of non-conference schedule, then just going into the Mountain West slate after that. There's a lot of big games, a lot of opportunities to kind of face heartbreak. Like, how do you respond if you lose a 2-point game at San Diego State? Do you let it, kind of fester, or you're able to kind of respond? And I think they're going to be able to handle it well, just because the experience of this team, but defensive success and consistency.
Yeah, I don't want to cop out here and use Justin's answer, but I think to tag along here with the defensive mentality is that, Rob, as you mentioned, CSU has gotten incrementally better every single year on defense under Medved with CSU. But I do think there is a bit of an asterisk there with how last season went, because this team was extremely lucky on the defensive end. And I was looking at some of the numbers before hopping onto this, and also in my CSU preview. But CSU opponents had, I think, the third worst free throw shooting percentage, or you could say free throw defense, but it doesn't really exist. But something like 61% at the line is what CSU opponents shot last year, which is unheard of. And the Rams also allowed, I want to say, 41 or 42% of their opponents' field goals from 3-point range. So they gave up a lot of 3-point attempts, even though they ranked somewhere in the top 40, top 50 in terms of 3-point percentage defense. So just the numbers will tell you these things will probably balance out quite a bit. You can't get that lucky 2 years in a row. And that isn't to say that the Rams defense is average or bad by any means, but these numbers tend to find their balance a little bit. So I do think that they'll have to step things up defensively and making sure that they're really locking down on the perimeter, because, if Matt Bradley's rolling into town, if Grant Sherfield's coming to town, some of these guys who can really put up points, you don't really want to give up 20, 30 3-point attempts a night, because sometimes it just won't go your way. So they'll get tested game one against Oral Roberts. We know what Max Asmus can do and those guys, but I do think that some of these percentages might balance out a little bit, so they need to be especially stingy on defense to make all of this work.
Color me shocked that Eli Betker is the guy that brings up defensive 3-point shooting regression on a Colorado State basketball preview. I love it. Listen, guys, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much. And here's to hoping we get a really, really good Colorado State basketball season.
Thanks for having me on, man.
I knew you were going to bring that up at some point, Eli. I was just waiting for it.
It's funny because I was going through this for our preview magazine thing that we're working on, and then I went to go through Three Man Weave's preview, and they had like a whole paragraph about the same exact thing. So I was like, well, it's there, so I might as well reference it.
I mean, you're not wrong. It's just it's very very on brand.
True to the brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, guys, I appreciate it. This is going to go out on what's today? Thursday. I think it's going to go out on Monday. So I'll make sure to send you a link and tag you on Twitter and do all that good stuff when it goes out.
Really appreciate the opportunity.
Ranked?
What?
Where do you have CSU ranked?
34th.
Okay.
I have San Diego State 41st, Nevada 50th, and Colorado State at 34th. And I think I might be one of the highest people on them. But I mean, look, you bring everybody back. You have 2 sophomores that are going to be that become juniors that are going to be all league players and maybe in the conversation for conference player of the year. It's pretty good. So.
Yeah, I think Nevada's there, but that's like I've told you, that schedule is a disaster. You can't get an at-large bid with Big West wins. It's not going to do it.
Nope.
They went the exact opposite of CSU in terms of scheduling.
Bad.
Yeah,
like Long Beach State, and I don't know what they were doing, but
yeah, it could be. I would not be surprised to see something like Nevada with like 25 or 26 wins, winning the Mountain West, not getting into the tournament, and Colorado State and San Diego State finishing second and third and getting into the tournament.
Yeah,
it could be crazy to see something like that happen. But yeah. Anyway, guys, I appreciate it.
Great to meet you, man. Thank you for having me on. Eli, good to see you as always, buddy.
Yeah, good to see you, man.
Later, guys.
All right, tip.